Don't miss out. Something is about to land in your living room, and it's not what you think. Imagine a clock inside you. Its hands have been turning through years of habit, approval-seeking, and small survival strategies. Right now, those hands are nearing a moment that feels less like an ending and more like an unveiling. The great flash is about to hit your home. By home, I mean the place you live most of the time. Your nervous system, your preferences, the way you answer the phone, the language you use when no one else is in the room. This is not a headline event in the sky. It is an internal synchronization that changes how you resonate with the world. This video will help you recognize the signs so you can remain steady when the change arrives. Understand the inner mechanism that's at work and feel what the afterglow might look like in your daily life. I'll give you small, practical ways to notice and stay with the shift, not to force it, but to welcome it. If this line of thought lands in you the way it landed in me, drop the word home in the comments so we can see who's noticing. You'll know the great flash is nearby, what you stop tolerating. It arrives not with fireworks, but with an odd, quiet narrowing of appetite for things that used to fill time. The first sign is a taste shift, literally and figuratively. Foods you once ate without thinking now feel too heavy. The same applies to conversations that used to be snacks for your ego. You find yourself pulling away from the buffet of small performances. Maybe you skip the second helping at a dinner that feels performative. Maybe you scroll less because the curated moments taste stale. This is not a dietary discipline, it's a recalibration of preference. Taste is a useful measure because it's immediate and embodied. When your palate alters, something in you has changed its tuning fork. Another early sign is intolerance for inauthenticity. Picture a workplace meeting. You're in the room, coffee cup in hand, and someone offers a rehearsed smile. Instead of politely following the script, you feel a small, surprising resistance. Then you speak just once, an honest sentence that isn't polished for approval. The room shifts. Someone else nods. That tiny, honest line, simple, true, feels like taking a breath after holding it for too long. Or imagine closing an app and feeling relief rather than fear. The relief itself is instructive. It's the unfreezing beginning. Craving simplicity shows up in small acts. A person I know started choosing clear, straightforward meals and fewer commitments, not because they were trying to be spiritual, but because the clutter around them made their chest tight. Another neighbor decided to stop attending events where conversations were thin and presentation was heavy. They kept their weekend mornings for a slow walk and two honest friends. These are not dramatic exits. They are small, decisive redeployments of time and energy. If you notice yourself declining another social obligation and feeling quietly liberated, that's a sign. You may also notice that performance fatigue has a new quality. Exhaustion no longer wears the glamour of busyness. It feels like a frozen summer, bright but brittle. That's the false self, the layer of polish, scripts, and protective masks that kept you usable in situations you didn't fully own. The inner clock is counting down, not to punishment, but to expiration. It's as if the false self had an expiry date stamped on it, and you are now living in its final season. This doesn't mean everything collapses. Instead, cracks of thaw begin to appear. Small streams of original feeling run through. Mechanically, think of the great flash as a thawing rather than an ascension. Years of adapting to roles, expectations, and survival strategies create frost, hardened patterns in your nervous system that look and feel like identity. The flash gently warms those layers. It is not a sudden, blinding ascent to some unreal plane. It is a soft, steady unfreezing. Imagine sunlight on a frozen window. For a moment the world appears distorted and shaky, close enough to be unfamiliar. Then the ice softens. You wipe the remaining moisture with your palm, and you see clearly. The light has not changed. Your lens has. The metaphor of an exhale is useful here. If you have been holding your breath inside an old story, holding tension to keep things understandable, the flash allows a release. People report that life feels quieter in a good way, not dull but settled. Where there was hair-trigger reactivity, there becomes a patient pause. You notice before you respond. The pause is not avoidance. It's the newly available space where discernment lives. You might speak less, but when you do, your words carry more of you. There is also a quality in this process that feels like resonance. Think of the original self as a frequency that was gradually detuned by adaptation. As Thor moves through your system, your native frequency reasserts itself. It is not louder, it is steadier. When someone near you is agitated, your baseline remains unshaken. That steadiness is contagious. Calm is not inert, it has pull. The people around you begin to mirror that steadiness because it reduces friction and makes honest connection easier. The lighthouse image fits here. You become a soft, steady beacon rather than a flashing signal. Not everyone will turn toward you, but some will, simply because your light is consistent and safe to approach. The social consequences are quieter than dramatic, but no less profound. When more people synchronize to steadiness, emotional leverage loses its effectiveness. Systems that depend on reactivity, fear, scarcity, urgency, find fewer footholds. Imagine a room where fewer people amplify panic and more people model a measured presence. Conversations change their tone. Invitations to perform lose momentum. Decisions become less impulsive and more considered. That does not mean society transforms overnight. It means the baseline shifts. Consensus building, negotiation and repair become more possible. People with restored resonance are not morally superior. They are simply less useful for manipulation, and that changes dynamics in households, workplaces, and small communities. The Great Flash is also a form of arrival that is paradoxically patient. You may be early, you may be late. Neither state is failure. Readiness matters more than speed. Someone who arrived late might be more solid because they brought more life experience into their new clarity. Someone early might be luminous but tender, still learning how to anchor. Both come home. The metaphor of a house at dusk helps. Lights come on at different times, and each light contributes to the neighborhood's warmth. There is no shame in arriving at your timing. Because this shift is internal, the most important place to attend is your actual day-to-day. Pay attention to the small things. Notice what tastes like relief and what tastes like toxicity. Notice the sentences you cannot say any longer and the ones you suddenly can. Use sensory language to stay embodied. Where do you feel a tightening in your body when you are about to perform? Where does ease live in you? The clock metaphor can help here. Check your internal timepiece throughout the day, not as a way to hurry, but as a way to watch for rhythms that betray the old operating system. There are practical practices that honor the process without trying to force it. One is simple presence work. In the morning, when you first wake, place your attention on your breath for 3 full cycles before checking a screen. That threefold inhalation-exhalation can be a small ritual that reasserts your resonance. Notice how your language shifts when you commit to a brief pause between stimulus and response. Listening is a practice that returns you to steady ground. You will discover that the act of listening reconfigures the nervous system toward attunement. Another gentle practice is curating small boundaries. Boundaries are not a fortress against the world. They are a threshold that guards what you need to remain coherent. Say no to one obligation this week that feels like a performance and see what space opens. Experiment with refusing a conversation that aims to pull you into reactive territory. You do not need to explain your refusal, only to practice it. Each small boundary is a thawing of obligation, an honest realignment with your priorities. Observe how people around you respond. There will be moments when your quiet steadiness diffuses an argument simply by not fueling it. Consider a neighbor who used to escalate. One evening you meet them calmly on the steps, and your calm unravels the tension. That is not you doing someone's inner work for them. It is your resonance creating a different field. The lighthouse does not rescue ships. It offers consistent light, so captains can choose their path. In the same way, your steady presence provides a safer context for others to choose differently. The false self resists in its own way. Expect occasional relapse into old scripts. When that happens, meet it with curiosity rather than shame. Think of those moments as frost that temporarily reforms. Thaw doesn't have to be immaculate. Real growth is often messy. You may find yourself playing small again in certain rooms because the social payoff is well known. That is normal. Notice without moralizing. Ask yourself which choices restore your resonance and which concessions cost you more than they give. Discernment sharpens after the flash. Where there was once a blur between what is needed and what is performative, lines become clearer. You will not automatically know what every choice means, but you will get better at feeling whether an option aligns with your frequency. This discernment applies to relationships, to work, to the small daily rituals that weave your life. The shift often produces a prioritization of belonging over approval. You may find yourself longing for fewer, deeper connections rather than many shallow ones. That reorientation is not elitist. It is economizing your emotional energy. There are practical social ripples to watch for. Conversations in communities may slow down and deepen. Leadership styles might change toward facilitation rather than command. Marketing that relies on exploiting fear may feel hollow to larger audiences. Not everyone will shift at once, and that's fine. The change is not a demand for conformity. It is an invitation to recalibrate your personal radar so you instinctively opt for what feels life-giving. Let me offer a few short, concrete vignettes to make these shifts tangible. A woman named Anna stopped always laughing at the boss's jokes in order to be liked. One day, she simply stayed quiet, and when the floor opened, she said, "I think that idea risks burning us out." The room was surprised. The relief that followed was small but real. Another person, Jamal, deleted an app that made him compare his life to stories he didn't live. He felt emptier at first, and then clearer. In his steadiness, an old friend reached out and said, "You seem different, more yourself." The friend kept coming back to the difference because it felt safe. A third vignette. A teenager named Sam refused to stage a party photo. He instead invited two friends for tea and a long conversation. The two friends left the room seeming lighter, less compelled to perform. None of these shifts were dramatic on a global scale, but they were seismic in the small worlds they touched. You will likely notice sensory markers when a shift takes hold. There is often a taste of salt and clarity after tears that were needed. There is an exhale you cannot fake. The body lets go somewhere deep, often beneath the ribs. There is a loosening around the jaw, a drop in hurried speech, a willingness to sit with silence. These physical markers are not metaphors only. They are telemetry of inner recalibration. I invite you to tune in and catalog them. The simple act of noticing is a form of participation. There are also social signs to observe. Fewer people taking bait in manipulative conversations, more conversations that center repair over blame, and increased patience in small conflicts because people are less disposed to amplify drama. You might notice that persuasive techniques that worked before feel blunt now. Emotional blackmail loses some of its sting. That does not mean relationships become easy. Difficult conversations still happen. But the tenor shifts from reactivity to curiosity. This process does not promise miraculous fixes. It does not guarantee that all relationships will survive, nor that every struggle will disappear. Those would be hollow promises. What it does offer is a higher probability of steadier responses, clearer prioritization, and less susceptibility to external pulls that once dictated your choices. You will become harder to move by fear because your baseline is anchored in a different register. Anchor practices support this emergence. Imagine having a small lighthouse ritual, 5 minutes at night, where you name 3 moments from the day that felt honest, 3 that felt performed, and 1 tiny action for tomorrow that aligns with your native frequency. The ritual is not a magic bullet, it's an ongoing orientation toward what matters. Over weeks, this tiny habit will shape the architecture of your attention. Another anchor is community that values presence over performance. Seek a small circle where honesty is rewarded and performative energy is not the currency. You do not need to broadcast this search. Quietly notice which relationships invite you to be whole and which reward a facade. The former are places you nourish, the latter are rooms you visit less. Over time, your inner calendar reflects these choices. Quieter mornings, deeper friendships, preferences that feel like home. Part of the comfort in this process is knowing you are not required to do everything perfectly. The thaw is patient. The clock inside you is not a tyrant. It is an indicator that the old identity's license is wearing thin. As it expires, a different set of defaults becomes available. Gentler boundaries, less automatic defensiveness, a propensity to repair rather than escalate. Imagine replacing a worn-out map with one that shows the terrain more accurately. You will still travel, make errors, and recalibrate. The map simply reduces needless detours. When the flash hits, you may realize you have been living by other people's timetables. Freed from that expectation, your days take on a new cadence. Mornings may lengthen. You may prioritize real conversation over shallow likes. You may choose a job that requires less performance and more craftsmanship. None of this needs to be abrupt. Small choices compound. Declining one performative meeting, turning off a notification, speaking a truth in a single conversation, these are the grains of change. Remember that arriving late is not a sign of failure. Often lateness brings wisdom. The person who was late to their own awakening might have accumulated lessons that make their steadiness more sustainable. If you feel behind, you are not missing a one-time train. There are many ways to homecoming. Patience toward yourself is essential. Curiosity is your ally. Notice what happens when you swap judgment for observation. As the afterglow settles, you will likely experience greater discernment and less reactivity. Your relationships will not be immune to difficulty, but they will have more capacity for repair. Communities you belong to may become calmer, not by suppressing feeling, but by modeling steadiness as a resource. When calm spreads, it does not demand compliance. It simply offers an alternative field in which people can choose to operate differently. So what practical steps can you take right now to be present for this change? Begin with noticing. For the next 3 days, keep a small log of moments that taste like relief and moments that leave you drained. Notice where your attention goes first when a conflict arises. Practice a 2-second pause before replying to messages that provoke. Say one honest sentence this week in a situation where you would usually perform. See what shifts. Remember, these are invitations, not mandates. Each small experiment is a data point about how your resonance is changing. If you find a practice helpful, stay with it until it feels natural. If it feels forced, let it go. The aim is not to add more shoulds to your day, but to clear space for what already matters. Use your lungs as a gauge. Does the practice create a deeper breath? If so, it likely supports your native frequency. There will be moments of social friction. People accustomed to a certain dynamic may push back unconsciously. Expect that. Meet it with patience. Your steadiness is not denial. It's a firm but gentle presence that holds both clarity and compassion. You will sometimes need to distance yourself from interactions that reward performance. At other times, you will be the magnet for others seeking steadiness. Both are part of the social choreography of change. As you prepare for the great flash to hit your home, remember that home is not a single room, but the whole field of lived experience, your body, speech, work, and relationships. Treat it tenderly. Watch for tiny indicators, a change in taste, relief at leaving a conversation, an honest sentence in a meeting, calmer responses to provocation. These are the breadcrumbs of thaw. They are evidence that the inner clock is doing its work. Finally, a consoling reminder. The process is inherently kind. It does not demand heroics. It invites you to notice and to choose. It enfranchises discernment over reactivity and steadiness over spectacle. You may already be home. Perhaps you've already begun to reconfigure your mornings or to prefer depth over surface. Recognize that as arrival. If you haven't noticed much yet, remain curious rather than anxious. The timing will be yours. If you want more guidance on staying present during this shift, tools, short practices, and a community of people who are also recalibrating, subscribe and check the link in the description. Stay steady. Watch for the small signs, honor your timing, and let the soft light of your own lighthouse guide you home.